Hi, I'm Jay Feldman, Executive Director of Beyond Pesticides. I'd like to share with you our work with communities to transition to organic land management. But before I do that, I'd like to share the context of this program, because the context drives our approach and the critical importance we believe of this effort. The history of pesticides is a story of pesticide substitution. EPA started with its review of arsenic-based pesticides and DDT, and then, as we know, we see the industry and agency going through the generations of chemicals, from organochlorines like chlordane and dieldrin to organophosphates, chlorpyrifos, you've heard of that, to synthetic pyrethroids and neonicotinoids. We're literally playing whack-a-mole in the process of doing this. The risk assessment-based approach to regulatory review of these chemicals has failed us. Rachel Carson warned us about this in Silent Spring. While she was writing about DDT, the organophosphates like chlorpyrifos were emerging as the next generation of chemicals of choice. Of course, Silent Spring provides the framework for our thinking. We were warned that we must consider the impact we are having on complex biological systems when we apply biocides like pesticides, and that we should make wider use of alternatives. That was 1962. It wasn't until 1972 that EPA issued a cancellation order for DDT, with some exceptions. With the Carter administration, the organization I was working for in 1977 launched an effort to collect the field data necessary to develop a farm worker protection standard at EPA. When Beyond Pesticides was founded in 1981, we in the environmental community were focused on right to know. And as signs started popping up on lawns and communities, it became clear that signage didn't stop the chemical use. The pesticides are approved by EPA was a refrain. Long before we changed our name from the National Coalition Against the Misuse of Pesticides to Beyond Pesticides in 1998, it was clear that we must reframe the work, calling pesticide use unacceptable and causing unnecessary poisoning, indiscriminate adverse effects on the fragile web of human health and the environment, as Rachel Carson instructed. So we established a program that has 6 key elements, call them elements of change. Listening and seeing the empirical evidence of poisoning and contamination. Daily, we hear from victims of this. Searching, monitoring, and supporting the science. Elevating public understanding, translating the findings and experience into policy and practice, and then changing the culture and the market, individual corporate behavior. Of course, we must follow the science, tracking the independent peer-reviewed literature, and we make that available to lay people and decision makers. In addition to tracking the regulatory status, we assembled a relational database that links health outcomes to real-world exposure, frightening but essential information. With all the deficiencies in the state and regulatory review process and the unacceptable, slow, really generational pace at which it moves, our focus on grassroots becomes critical to effecting meaningful change. This was captured by the national media in the late 1970s after Mendocino County, California, by ballot initiative, banned the aerial application of the phenoxy herbicides, 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T. You know that mixture is as Agent Orange with dioxin contaminants. Citizens Against Aerial Application of Phenoxy Herbicides contended that as much as 70%, probably more, of the herbicides applied aerially on the county's forests and cattle ranches drifted away from the target area onto water, roads, neighboring property, and people. There was actually an incident in 1977 in which a full school bus of children got sprayed. The initiative was upheld by the state Supreme Court, but then it was overturned by the state legislature with language that preempted local authority to restrict pesticides. In the town of Casey, Wisconsin, in 1985, same situation. Every time the Christmas tree grower on the edge of town sprayed pesticides, the spray drifted into town and everybody was exposed, and many got sick. The town adopted an ordinance that actually limited his ability to spray in a manner that caused drift, and that started years of litigation, ending up in the case you're familiar with at the Supreme Court, which upheld the right of local jurisdictions to restrict pesticides under federal pesticide law. The court pointed out, however, that local authority was governed by state law. So the industry took their case to the state legislatures across the country and successfully preempted local elected bodies from protecting its jurisdiction's air, land, water, and people, including vulnerable populations. All but 6 states were preempted by state law. And where the local democratic process is robust, particularly in Maine and Maryland at this point, the industry is relentless in taking or trying to take a local authority away, either through changes in law or through litigation. And don't think that they're not working all angles in seeking federal preemption of the local democratic decision-making process, because they are. They nearly got a preemption clause in the last Farm Bill. And within the last several years, the Utah legislature voted to preempt. For the chemical landscape industry, this challenge to pesticide use of chemicals registered by EPA is just not acceptable from their perspective, of course. At one time, they launched a campaign called Project Evergreen and started advertising the fight with the gloves are off campaign. Here's what they said. Sound familiar? Because of activists, extremists, and misinformed politicians, consumers are questioning whether the products and resources such as water used to care for their lawns, landscapes, and other green spaces are a waste or a harm to the environment. We responded with a Get a Grip campaign message. The chemical lawn care industry is worried that the word is getting out on the basic hazards of lawn pesticides. So they are attacking environmentalists and health advocates. The facts speak for themselves. Rather than simply saying the pesticides are safe because they are registered by EPA, although we expect to be attacked with misinformation, the industry is using tactics to undermine the science, as Carrie Gillum writes about in her book, The Monsanto Papers and Whitewash. With this, they also try to introduce doubt into deliberations of local decision-making bodies questioning the science. So we shifted from right to know that you're being poisoned with a yellow flag in your yard to pesticide-free zones, declaring by example that beautiful landscapes can be managed without toxic chemicals. And we established some victories with a range in depth and breadth, from aspirational statements of sustainable practices, protection of waterways, restriction of schools, to clear prohibitions with limitations on specific toxic pesticide use. We've tracked 185 local policies that span the gamut across the country on our US map of pesticide reform policies. In this potentially transformational moment in history, where we are as a society talking about systemic change, it's fitting that we dramatically change the systems that pollute and poison our communities. So we shift to organic, recognizing that organic eliminates petroleum-based chemicals and synthetic fertilizers, manages soil health, and maximizes sequestration at the same time that it combats climate crisis and biodiversity decline. Yes, biodiversity. We have dedicated funds to help underwrite the cost of bringing to communities a horticultural viewpoint through a horticulturist, and working with the advocates and the community. We also partner with forward-thinking corporations like Natural Grocers and Stonyfield nationwide, as well as organizations like Bright Cities and their Healthy Babies, Bright Futures program, who bring resources to the community. So there are real opportunities here for collaboration. Because terms like natural and misrepresentation of concepts, whether it's sustainable or integrated pest management, are rampant, clear definitions are required in policies. And because we don't want to increase the burden on local governments, we rely on existing law for definitions and updated science. So we have model language with definitions so there is no misunderstanding the spirit and intent and the community values and principles behind these laws. This is not just a technical issue, however, and mere coordination with the parks or the public works departments isn't sufficient. Our programs require that where there's community support, we will see success. And so local advocates put together the elements of a program that builds local support. And these next slides really hone in on that. Coalition building. whether we're talking environmental justice groups or medical practitioners, scientists, landscapers, support for leaders who come from all walks of life. This is Paula Rogovin, a teacher in the New York City public school system, who launched a campaign that engaged parents and the area's New York City Council member to advance legislation that passed the City Council unanimously on Earth Day this year. Through this, we shared challenges, successes, and strategies. Advocacy can't be understated. Community hearings are critical. And showing your support helps spread the word, as this landscaper from Connecticut does with signs and bumper stickers pasted over his truck. Once the community successfully engages with the decision makers, we are ready to sign a good faith agreement through our program, and we call it an action plan with the town, at which point we will commit resources to beginning this organic land transition program in the community. And then the organic transition begins with an evaluation, training, plan development. We take soil samples, evaluate soil texture, soil chemistry, soil biomass, and microorganisms. We get out on the field, or recently we use remote information, and dig into cultural practices, aeration, irrigation, cultivation, overseeding, mowing. And we do this with the people that are doing the work, and organic compatible input materials based on soil analysis and the plan requirement are considered. Then the community is ready to take credit for this commitment and the important change it is embarking on. A joint press release goes out and the project is off and running. When the community does this kind of thing, we look more holistically at what organic land management really means. And this slide really shows us that organic has a holistic impact and this is an ag slide, of course, but it relates directly to soil management. As you know, communities and their local leaders increasingly care about their carbon footprint, how they are working on, the climate action issues, their climate action plans or resiliency plans, their ethical questions around the impact that decisions are having on fence line communities where the chemical they are buying are produced. There is disproportionate risk to city employees who use toxic chemicals and those who use the park. And this program brings the community together through a holistic solution that meets the existential crises of the day. At the same time, in collaboration with grassroots successes, we bring our message to the federal and state level. It's a powerful message when it's supported by grassroots. And these successes and deliberations are critical to deliberations at the state and national level. The only option is an organic future. So let's work together on organic land management transition in your community. Please contact Beyond Pesticides about our organic land management program. Look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much.